Thank you very much. When Karl Barth, the famous Swiss theologian, was asked, what is the most profound truth? Put into a few words, he said, Jesus loves me. Thank you for a very artistic expression of taking a classical theme and feeding this special spiritual message into that. And thank you also again for the simplicity of a saw that becomes a singing instrument. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me share with you what happened in 1999. In the spring of 1999, the heads of the world's largest processed food companies, from Coca-Cola to Nabisco to Mars, gathered in Minneapolis for a secret meeting. A secret meeting. On the agenda, could somebody take care of the children so that they understand something about fitting into an auditorium like this one here? Could someone take care of the children? Could we close the doors, please? Could we close the doors, please? Yeah. I have grandchildren, and I know they can sometimes be a little bit difficult to handle, but we also have parents, and they should take care of these children. So let me start again. In the spring of 1999, the heads of the world's largest processed food companies, from Coca-Cola to Nabisco and Mars, gathered at headquarters in Minneapolis for a secret meeting. A secret meeting. On the agenda, the emerging epidemic of obesity and what to do about it. Increasingly, the foods laden with salt, sugar, and fat that these companies produced were being linked to obesity, to diabetes, to hypertension, and many of our chronic diseases. And so a concerned Kraft executive took the stage to issue a warning. Now you have to understand that many of these large corporations, they employ over 700,000 people. And they have an annual sales volume of over $280 billion. Many of these processed food companies have been acquired by Philip Morris, the tobacco giant. And so this Kraft cheese company executive was very concerned because his company had just been purchased by Philip Morris, the tobacco industry. And he knew what happened to the tobacco industry. Remember, they had lawsuits and they paid billions of dollars for helping people to become rehabilitated from smoking. And so he was very concerned that the same thing could happen to his company, which was really a food company, but that nevertheless the same legal steps may be taken. And so a concerned Kraft executive to the stage to issue a warning. He said there would be a day of reckoning unless changes were made. This executive then launched into a damning PowerPoint presentation, making the point and case that processed food companies could not afford to sit by idle as children and adults grew sick and class action lawyers lurked on the sidelines, ready to pounce on them. To deny the problem, he said, is to court disaster. Do you get the impression? You get the picture? When he was done, the most powerful person in the room, now remember, these are 11 executives. They're meeting in a secret meeting to discuss the epidemic of Western diseases, chronic diseases, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. They were all linked to possibly the foods that they produced. Just 11 executives, big-time people, GEOs, CEOs. When he was done, the most powerful person in the room, the CEO, the top man of General Mills, stood up. He stood up to speak, and he was clearly annoyed. He was clearly and visibly upset. And by the time he sat down, the meeting was over. What do you think happened? What do you think happened? Why were these meetings canceled after just the first meeting was held? Why? Help me. What do you think happened? Are you out there? What's that? That's one point. Okay, we're on the track. Someone else? Why was the meeting canceled? It cost too much to change. Okay. Didn't care. He only cared about profitability. Here's what happened. Here's what happened. He said, the American, the North American, the Canadian, these countries, these populations are very fickle-minded. One day they want to have a low fat, then they want to have high fat diet, then they want to have a high carbohydrate, then low carbohydrate. Someday they want to have salt, then they want sugar. They're very fickle-minded. We have only one thing to do. Damn the torpedoes, sell. Are you with me? Why is the North American public so fickle-minded? Why do we fall for every fad and every fashion that comes along? Why? Why are we so confused? We are the most confused people on the issue of diet foods. Nobody seems to know what to do. And some people have suggested it has to do with the fact that perhaps we gave up on home economics. We used to all have home economics years ago. It's gone. Betty Crocker took over. She was an imaginary icon of the convenient processed food industry. Why are we so confused? I mean, I had a man coming to me, and he was a diabetic, and he was getting tired of eating 7-grain cereal every morning. That's what we recommend in our CHIP program. A hot cereal in the morning, it's great for winter days here in Canada, it's perfect. Some fruits on it, you know, some of these kind of things. 7-grain cereal. And he said, sir, it's too much of the same. I need something soft or something nice. Can you give me something else? I said, yeah. You don't like 7-grain cereal? No, he said, I want something else. I said, okay, we have 8-grain cereal. Well, that didn't quite fit his expectation either. So I said, why don't you have some millet? Now, how many of you know what millet is? How many of you don't know what millet is? Okay, nobody wants to admit it. Okay, one man there. Okay, two. Okay, yeah, so there's some of you here. I understand. And so he said, what is millet? And somebody said, oh, it's bird seeds. You know those little yellow bird seeds? And they're very nice. You can make a beautiful dish from this. You can make it into a tomato dish, make it into a sweet dish. It's very, very versatile. It's wonderful. And so I recommend to him, why don't you have some millet? He said, okay, sir. He comes back after a week. I didn't want him to lose any weight because he was a slim diabetic. And he came back and he had lost 1 pound. And I said, Jim, I didn't want you to lose any more weight. What happened? He said, sir, you told me to eat those millet things. I said, well, did you eat them? Yes, I ate those bird seeds. And then I thought to myself, why would you lose weight on those? And then I asked him, did you cook them? He said, no, you didn't tell me. So all of a sudden it hit me. This man was chewing those bird seeds. I mean, without having cooked them. And I began to understand, this was an American situation, they have absolutely very little idea about these kind of foods. And we need to really begin to help the illiteracy of our populations today when it comes to foods, especially foods that you prepare in your home. We have a lot of work to do. Well, let me share with you a few ideas here today of what the evidence is of why we should change. And then you can come into the CHIP program and you learn how to change. So I'm going to talk to you about why we need to change. So I want to talk to you about fork and knife, which are the weapons of mass destruction, in my opinion, but they can also be the instruments of healing. Let's take a look at overweight, at diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and coronary artery disease. These are some of the leading causes of death. You notice here, cardiovascular disease, that's heart disease and stroke, account for every 3rd death in Canada, every 4th death is cancer, and every 6th cause of death is diabetes. So 70% of our deaths in Canada were hardly known 100 years ago. Here you can see Sir William Osler, the great Canadian physician. He wrote in 1928 in his medical textbook, he said, you can expect 1 heart attack per year. Hello? How many? 1 heart attack per year in an average hospital, an average sized town. Today, when you come to Canada, you have 400 heart attacks a day. When you go to the US, it's 4,000 heart attacks a day in the US. We have had a dramatic increase, an epidemic that was hardly there. I mean, 1928, if you had a person with a heart attack, you would call all the doctors from the area, you would call all the medical students, all the residents, and say, look at this unusual case where the heart has been attacked. Heart attack. It was so rare. Today, you ask your medical student to take a look at a heart attack, he doesn't want to hear anything about it anymore. They've already seen too many in just their 2 years. Then you look at breast cancer trends, you see the dramatic increase. This is the US. This could also be Canada. 1 in 20 women in 1960. Today, 1 in 7 women developing breast cancer. Now, whenever I talk to you about US, you can actually also put in there Canada, because the difference is not very, very much. Many of these foods that we have in the US, they've drifted up here, and sometimes your food have drifted down south of the border too. So here you see the dramatic increase in diabetes, an increase of 900%, in particular since 1985. Something happened here. These are not genetic diseases. When it comes to genetics, it takes 300 years to change the genetics in the society. People say, well, my father had it and so I have it too. No! These are new diseases. These are new epidemics here. I had this woman coming to me and she said, sir, I take issue with you. My grandfather was obese. My grandmother was obese. My father was obese. My mother was obese. I'm obese. My husband is obese. My children are obese. This is genetics. And I said, may I ask you a question? Yeah. I said, do you happen to have a dog? Is your dog overweight? Yes. Is that genetics? That loony fell pretty slowly. It took you some time to figure that one out, didn't you? Is a dog fat because of genetics? It better not be, right? So today in Canada, every third baby born will become a diabetic in a lifetime. This is an incredible epidemic. And then you look at the American chairs, and it's not very much different up here in Canada. You can see the width was pretty much the same for many, many years. In the 1980s, something happened. They developed a surplus of lumber in Canada, and the US said, okay, we buy your lumber, we make larger chairs. Right? Today, everything is oversized in North America. The chairs are oversized. The pants are oversized. The gurneys in hospitals are oversized. The coffins are oversized. I had a CEO from a rehabilitation hospital call me, and he said, we need to do something about people that have paralysis, because they're in these chairs, they're wheelchairs, and, we have to buy larger and larger cranes to be able to lift these 500-pound, 600-pound bodies out of their chairs and put it into bed. We need to have a lifestyle medicine approach that teaches them a new way of eating, because they don't exercise, they cannot exercise, so they have to have a better, healthier diet, because as they get larger, the diabetes get worse, the hypertension gets worse, the arthritis gets worse, the depression gets worse. It's all related to overweight. And here you see it again. When you are overweight, when you're obese, you have 700% more likelihood of developing diabetes, 7 times more, 6 times more high blood pressure, much more heart disease, arthritis, asthma, and so on, and also the different kind of cancers that we find in breast, prostate, and colon and cervix, and also ovarian cancer, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, arthritis, asthma. Wherever you have extra pounds, you have to worry about these diseases. And people say, well, how did this all happen? Why did it happen in the 1980s? That's when these epidemics really escalated significantly. And something happened in 1970, 1980. You can see here the fast food. We shifted from whole foods to broken up foods. We shifted from slow foods to fast foods. And as it happened, you can see the dramatic change in the sales volume of these fast foods. Just to give you some idea, McDonald's, as just one of these companies, spends over $900 million here in Canada and in the US just on marketing their products. This is the most important slide for you. If you understand this, you don't have to be quite so confused anymore. And that has to do with the diet composition. This looks at where the calories come from. When you have a piece of bread, where do the calories come from? A slice of bread has about 120 calories or something like this. So where do the calories come from? The calories in bread come from protein. Bread has protein. They come from fat. There's fat in bread. Okay, oil. It comes from starch. Bread has starch. And it comes from sugars. There's sugars in bread. Now, you can take any food and you can look at this scientifically and you say, aha, how much protein is in that orange? About 1 gram. How much sugar is in that orange? You can figure that out. Are there any starches in an orange? And then what is the fourth one? How much fat is in an orange? You can take any food, you can take a steak, and you can begin to say, aha, how much of the calories in that steak comes from fat? How much comes from protein? So food is always broken down into 4 components that carry the calories. It's protein, starch, sugar, and fats. Are you with me so far? Is everybody awake? Okay? All right. I know it's hard after a meal, isn't it? And by the way, folks, you did a great job today. Let's applaud these folks here. That was really outstanding. I really appreciate this. I know you do it every week like this, don't you? You didn't do this just for me, did you? All right. It's a good way to go. So now, you take a Mexican farmer, a simple farmer, a poor farmer, and what does a farmer in Mexico eat? Help me out. Give me some ideas. Just raise your hand. Yes. Corn. Beans. So corn, beans. What is it? Yeah. No. Foods that have calories. Potatoes. Corn. Beans. Brown rice. Jalapenos, these vegetables, they don't have very many calories. But the calories come largely from starchy foods. Right? Beans are starchy foods. Right? Corn is starchy food. Right? Potatoes are starchy food. And when you look at the chart here, you're going to realize that about 80% of all the calories in the Mexican diet of a poor farmer comes from starch, but this is unrefined starch. That's the starch that has all the vitamins. That's the starch that has all the fiber. It has not been removed. It has not been refined. It's not white flour, but it's whole flour. But you know, what else does the Mexican farmer eat? Well, he probably has a chicken once in a while, right? And maybe they have a pork roast for the whole community. Everybody gets a slice, right? But they're basically whole food, plant-based diets. Very little animal product. Now, the farmer says to his wife, you know, we are really having a hard time making a living here. I want to go to get retrained. I go to Guadalajara, and I'm going to become a programmer for computers. And so they have an agreement, and he said in about 3 years, we should have saved enough money. I sent the money back every month. We should have enough money, and then we can make it to Guadalajara, and the kids can go to college, to the university there. Great plan. Every month he sends his money back, and he's doing very, very well. And then before you know it, after a while, guess what he does? He no longer eats the foods that he used to eat on the little farm. He's now eating with the big boys. See, now he has become more affluent. You see the money here? The money has gone up. And as the money goes up, the diet composition changes. So he's not here, see? And pretty soon he will be up here. The more money you make, the more you move towards processed foods. And so he was eating potatoes here. Now he's eating Pringles. The Pringles have nothing to do with potatoes. Pringles is 60% fat. It's a high-fat food. When it comes here to the oats that he used to have here, now he eats Oreos. Oreos, that's fat and sugar, right? Then he had corn here. Now he eats Doritos. Doritos, those corn chips have nothing to do with corn. It's basically 60% fat. And then you begin to look here. The beans that he used to have here, now he eats burgers. Burgers are high-fat food by and large. And he used to eat at home. Now he's eating out, right? He traded slow foods for fast foods. And he traded water for soft drinks. And with that, the diet composition began to change radically. You can see here there's more animal protein now. He has his burgers. There's more protein coming into the system. Whatever starch he eats now is basically white floured starch. You know, you have cakes and pies and donuts. You know, these are and Tim Horton assortments, right? These kind of things. Yeah. And before you know it, it's a diet that's very high in sugar, that's very low in starch. Whatever starch you have is usually very refined white flour things, and you have a lot of fat. So that the diet now in Canada is about 35% fat, and it's about 20% sugar, and then you have a lot of protein, especially animal protein. Here, the people used to eat plant protein. Here now they eat animal protein. Whenever you have this animal protein, you also have cholesterol, because cholesterol is only found in animal products. Okay? So there's a significant change in the diet. And so what you want to do, if you want to be healthy, you need to switch from the modern diet composition towards a simple diet composition. If you want to go forward in health, you have to go backward in the kind of diet. Simple foods. Somebody said to me, if grandma cannot read the label, don't eat it. When you read labels, they're all foreign words. They're all chemical names there. And somebody said, if grandma can't understand, if grandma cannot pronounce it, maybe you shouldn't eat it at least too often. Are you with me? What we recommend to people is, well, let me tell you what happened to me. a physician came to me and he said, I'm a pediatrician, I take care of children, and I have only 8 minutes to take care of the patient. That's the average in America. He said, in 8 minutes, I have to diagnose the ill, I have to match it with a pill, and I have to send him home with a bill. 8 minutes, next one, please. It's very stressful. 8 minutes. And he said, you want me to tell the mother to change the diet for the kid? It's impossible. I have no time for this. I said, oh, yes, you do. He said, you tell me. I said, would you have 20 seconds to give her a good nutritional advice? It's impossible. I said, no, listen. Tell her. Eat more foods that don't have nutrition labels. Do you have nutrition labels on mangoes? Do you have nutrition labels on mango sauce? Do you have nutrition labels on tomatoes? On tomato sauce? Do you have nutrition labels on potatoes? On potato Pringles? Oh, what's the difference? One comes out of the hand of the master designer. The other one comes out of laboratories of large professional engineering firms. And the government requests these products to list the ingredients because they have taken a good food and turned it into something that is made for profit, not for health. Are you with me? And I said to him, and of course, the mother will get some idea, but she still doesn't know how to operationalize that, how to turn it into something that she can really understand, some practical terms. And I said, you send her to the CHIP program all over the country, and they'll teach you how to do it. CHIP is about how to do it. CHIP is also about why we should do it. So let me just go a little bit further here in our why presentation. Now, the gentleman here, okay, would you stand up? Yeah, okay. I want to ask you a personal question. You can refuse to answer that, but you could also answer it if you feel comfortable. Do you eat 30 teaspoons of sugar a day? No. Okay, please sit down. I believe you. If you don't eat 30 teaspoons of sugar a day, that means then some of your neighbors must be eating your share, right? So there are people that are eating 40, 50 teaspoons of sugar a day. How much nutrition is in sugar? Big zero. Okay. You say, well, how can I get 30, 40 teaspoons of sugar a day? It's easy. Let me show you. The average family here in London, husband, wife, and 2 kids in elementary school, buy 32 soda pops, those small cans, a week. I mean, look how we waste our money. You waste money by having some water with a little bit of bubbling stuff in there and lots of chemicals and sugars, and we say, that's the good life. It's turning into a sour life. I'll give you some other ideas here. Maybe you say, well, I don't drink these soda pops. What about this one here? See? Have you seen those things? Do you have them here in Canada? No, you don't have those here. Okay. But if they ever come up here, be sure you always eat the center, okay? That's probably the safest part. German chocolate cakes, and then you have an empty nest. And you say to your husband, we shouldn't really let this waste. It's such a special treat. So you have 2 slices of German chocolate cake, and right there you have 30 teaspoons of sugar just for that little treat there. Banana split, people die for this. And then this is what we give to the kids. Folks, this is not a grain. This is a candy. This is 52%. Oh, I'm sorry. They lowered it. Now it's now 48% of the calories is sugar. We're paying a lot of money for these kind of things. These are here the corn chips or the potato chips. I asked my medical students, how many calories do you have in a tube of Pringles? They said, sir, we don't take nutrition medical school. We don't know. Too bad, isn't it? That's where the therapy is for many of our diseases. Don't know. I said, well, how about 1,100 calories? And I said, how long would it take you to eat those 1,100 calories there? They had some discussion. They said, 30 minutes, sir. 30 minutes. And some, of course, argue, oh, we can do it in 5 minutes. Okay, 13 minutes. 1,100 calories. That's 1/3 of a pound of fat on your body in 13 minutes. 1/3 a pound of fat. Then I asked them, if you wouldn't have these potato chips and you have to eat potatoes, how many potatoes would you have to eat? They said, we don't know, sir. We don't have nutrition classes. I said, okay, you'd have to eat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 medium-sized potatoes. And I said, no. Potatoes are fattening. Whoever said that? You can have 10 potatoes, that's 1,100 calories. That's the same as 1 tube of Pringles. And then they said, oh, it depends what you put on top. Right. What do you put on top? You open it up, it becomes a sort of a caloric grave. Right? What do you put inside? Sour cream, what else? Cheese? Bacon. Only God knows what we hide in those potatoes. And then they come out as caloric bombs of 500, 600 calories, and there were only 100 calories before. Are you with me? Sometimes we are the processors, right? And you say, well, I don't want to eat just the potato. What do you put on top? Well, do you have salsa up here? Could you use yesterday's lentil soup? You say, oh, that's wonderful. You know, lentil soup always gets better the second and third day, right? So cook some extra, put on your potatoes, and a little bit of, you know, you garnish it up with some parsley and so on. Always garnish things up, because people eat with their eyes as well. My wife is really good at that. It's always a joy to come and sit at the table. Now, sometimes people come to me and they say, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't eat anything. I mean, I just eat like a bird, and look what happened to me. There must be something in the water. There must be something in the air. It must be my thyroid. Well, it sometimes can be the thyroid, but by and large, what they don't understand is, then I asked them, now you said you eat like a bird. What kind of a bird are you referring to? You know, there are vultures out there. And they forget. They just had, in the afternoon, one of these milkshakes. It's a large one, but this was 2,000 calories, and my wife shouldn't have more than 1,600 calories for the whole day of good food. This is just a little treat, and people sort of, I don't know if it's conveniently or they just don't think about it. They forget this. They say, well, I hardly eat anything. I eat like a bird, and look what happened to me. Hello? You know, this is 3 times the amount of fat that the body should have for the whole day. This is 40 teaspoons of sugar. This is 40 teaspoons of sugar, and it's loaded with fat and seductive taste, right? And that's where we fall down. When you look at the calories, where they come from, these are called empty calories. What's an empty calorie? What do you mean by that? Empty calories, what does it mean? Empty? No nutrition value. They're naked calories. They're processed calories. There's no nutrition value there. It's just calories and taste. But remember, taste is something that we have learned. I used to love beef bacon. And then, tragically, I learned the nutritional content of beef bacon, and everything changed. I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I just saw, when I saw a piece of bacon, I mean, I would be willing to kill for a piece of bacon in those days. I mean, I loved this beef bacon. I could smell it, I would walk. It was just a magnetic force. And then, if I would see a person, after I began to understand what was in that bacon, I saw a person having some of their bacon. I said, sir, don't you understand? Listen to your arteries, they're clogging up right now. Of course, that's a little bit an exaggeration, right? It doesn't happen overnight. But in my mind, I began to visualize what this bacon, this saturated fat, would do to these arteries. I see people with a glass of whole milk, And I know what this whole milk does. The saturated fat in that 1 glass of milk is the equivalent of saturated fat in 4 bacon strips. And the saturated fat causes the liver to go into overdrive to produce excessive cholesterol that is then begin to clog up the arteries from the inside out. Saturated fat is the most devastating factor in heart disease, along with what we call trans fats. When you take good oils, sort of liquid oils, and you transform them into hydrogenated fats so they don't turn rancid. And the government doesn't want, in America, doesn't want you to take more than 2 grams. You know what a gram is? Now, Americans never have a clue when I say 2 grams. What's a gram? Now, you know what a gram is in Canada, right? You're on the metric system, right? Right? You deal with kilometers and kilograms, right? And meters? 2 grams. That's virtually nothing. Trans fats, they're very powerful, even worse than the saturated fat, to stimulate your liver to produce excessive amounts of cholesterol, which then with the cholesterol that you eat in animal products causes the high cholesterol in our bloodstream. I was totally amazed when I was in China, where the cholesterol levels are at the level of 2.2 or 3.0. And here in Canada, people think when they're 5.2, they're okay. No. And people in Canada think that 5.2, the physicians tell them that. If you have a 5.2, you are normal. Yeah, you normally die from heart disease. You don't want to be normal. You want to be ideal. You want to have the normal values that you find in countries where you don't have heart disease. It was impossible to find heart disease in China. That was 25 years ago. Everything is changing now. They're becoming more and more Americanized, westernized, and so the cholesterol levels have gone up since then. But now you have heart disease there, just like you never found heart disease in Japan after World War II. Now it's everywhere. So when it comes to empty calories, please note about 16% of the calories that we eat comes from refined sugar, no nutrition value. 20% comes from refined fats and oils, refined, no nutrition value. And then alcohol, when you add this to it, you begin to realize that 45% of what we eat, 45% of the calories, have no nutritional value, and we are overfed and undernourished. Are you with me? And folks, you say, well, I'm going to take some vitamin pills. I take some supplements. Forget it. To be in good health, you need about 100,000 different kinds of micronutrients that you find only in plant foods. We are wonderfully and fearfully engineered. There are no simple answers. By taking some vitamin C out of an orange, then you take the tablet and you say, well, I had my orange for today. No, there are 50 more micronutrients that make that vitamin C in the orange to become bioactivated and to really work well for you. It's totally different from what you take in a pill. But we have been sold on this idea we all need to have these supplements because the soil has been depleted. Folks, we're getting food today from all over the world. I had some blueberries today from Chile. I had some grapefruits today from Israel. The idea that all the soil areas in the world are all depleted nutritionally, it's really a big stretch of the imagination. So, here's the book, Salt, Sugar, and Fat. What does it say? How the food giants hooked us. This meticulously researched book tells the chilling story of how a processed food industry is making a fortune by slowly poisoning an unwitting population. Remember the CEO of General Mills was very upset when the first presentation was made. And then in so many words, he said, damn the torpedoes, our task is to sell. Let me tell you what happens. These companies are all tied in to a large research laboratory where 300 PhDs work in the area of brain research. These 300 PhDs at the Monell laboratory, they have a budget of $17.5 million. And they study the amount of salt needed in the food to hijack the brain chemistry. They study how much sugar is needed to hijack the brain chemistry. They study the amount of fat that is needed to hijack the brain chemistry. And they study, if you combine 2 and 3 of these, what will it take to hijack the brain chemistry to give you this pleasurable activation in the area where the brain registers pleasure and delight. When you have a heroin addict, when they take the heroin, it begins to light up in this particular area where the center is to register pleasure. There's a deep pleasure there. And it does the same thing with food. And once you have that Oreo on your tongue, once you have that M&M on your tongue, within nanoseconds, there's a registration of joy and pleasure in the pleasure center of the brain. And that's why you cannot eat just one M&M. That's why you cannot eat only one Pringle. That's why you cannot eat just one Oreo. Are you with me? Do you believe that the tobacco industry understands something about how to allure people into their products? Do you believe that the tobacco industry knows something about how to habituate people into certain selections? Do you think the tobacco industry knows something about how to addict people? They've done it for many, many, many years. And now that they're owning many of these processed food companies, they'll do exactly that. Today, it's not sufficient anymore to talk about the importance of moving towards a vegetarian diet. Today, we have to be just as concerned, if not more so, about the processed foods that we eat. I have people that come to me, but I'm a vegetarian, I don't eat my friends. Pass the cakes. It's not a healthy way to go. This one perhaps we should do, but this one we probably should not. We have to have a more comprehensive understanding of how to be in good health. Number one, we have to let go of these processed foods. If you want to have your soda, if you want to have your Coke, if you want to have your whatever you have here, folks, let it be a very occasional treat only. If you want to have those donuts, if you want to have those kind of things, let it be a very, very special treat sometime. Be careful, because it habituates you very, very quickly. Processed foods. And then, of course, you have all these foods that you just shove into the microwave oven. It's all done for you, right? They have all kinds of fancy names, as if it was nature's healthy way to eat. I was in New York on a television program, and the moderator asked me, are you saying something about food preparation? I said, well, I was thinking to mention it. And she said, please don't. This is New York. And she said, we don't have any more stoves, we don't have any more kitchens. We have just in our new condominiums, nuking stations. We are modern people. Slow foods don't exist anymore. And people, when they have a steak, they don't recognize that that steak comes from an animal. If we had to kill every chicken before we eat it, I dare say that many people would not eat chickens anymore. But we have a disassociation there. So, processed foods, be very, very careful. Now, I come to the second point. So the first point is, be careful, be reserved, use processed foods only as special treats or for special occasions. Now I come to the second point of my presentation, be careful with animal products, because meat, poultry, and fish, they represent 35% of all the fat that we eat, followed by salad oils and shortening, 31% as well. Folks, if you want to lose weight, be careful with salad oils and shortening. Do you have a product here that's called Pam? You have? What's so good about Pam? Tell me. How many calories? Zero. Zero calories. And, I told my wife for years, I said, honey, just get the Pam. No calories. Now, I'm supposed to know this. I didn't. And what she did, she would just take the Pam and she would spray the pan. Shh. 10, 11, 12 seconds. No calories. It's great, right? And then one of my colleagues said to me, Hans, do you know what it says on the PAM can? It's 0 calories, but you can only use 1/3 of a second. 1/3 of a second. Just that much. This is 0 seconds. Because if it's under 0.5 calories, then you can put down 0. So it has 0.5 calories per 1/3 of a second. Nobody can do that. So you are totally misled. And here I tell my wife, honey, just use PAM. It has no calories. Shh. Oh. And if I'm confused and I'm misled, I can just imagine everybody is just about misled, right? Dairy products represent 50% of all the fat that we eat. So you can see 80% of the fat that we eat comes from animal products and salad oils and shortening. Here, I told you earlier that the calories come from animal protein. No, let me say it again. I mentioned to you earlier that the calories that we eat come from either protein, starch, sugar, or fat, right? So when people talk about meat, what do we think of? Is meat carbohydrates? No. Meat is protein, yes. Protein is important, right? I mean, it has sort of a super status in our society. Absolutely wrong. It's all marketing hype. We take 2 times the amount of protein that we should have for good health. 2 times the amount. And that's why you have so much kidney disease, because kidneys have to process all this protein and get through the system, and they're overloaded. When we have people moving towards kidney dialysis, we usually put them on a very, very low protein diet, and the kidneys begin to recover in many cases. They don't have to be on dialysis, or they don't have to be on kidney replacement. High protein, dangerous. High protein pushes cancer to be promoted very rapidly. You turn the protein content down, especially when it's coming from animals, and the cancer rates begin to drop. The cancer growth diminishes dramatically, even stops. So you look at a sirloin steak, and you say, well, that's protein, right? Yeah, 25%, but fat is 75%. So next time you think about a sirloin steak, what do you think of? Fat. Some of these people, they have spare ribs. I mean, you think of protein, yeah, 20%. Fat, 80%. Next time you see one of these hot dogs, what do you think? Fat, 85% fat. And folks, no one wants to know what the other 15% are made from. You will never eat another hot dog in your life. Because everything that you cannot sell, you push into that skin. 85% fat, sold at the hockey games. How about Philadelphia cheese? You have Philadelphia cheese up here? It's nice, isn't it, on a bagel? Yeah, it is, isn't it? What else do you put on? Some jam on the bagel on top of the... Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? I'm going to be spoiling it for you now. But I'll give you a few minutes to think about it first. Okay. Please note, this is the American situation where the meat consumption per person has gone from 124 to 200 over the last 100 years. And the meat that we had 100 years ago here was totally different from the meat that we have today. This was range-fed beef. It was lean. Today's is totally different. We want to have juicy steaks. We have the fat all over the place. You cannot cut it off. Just think about this. This is what the average American, probably Canadian too, eats in a lifetime. 12 cows. No, and this cow is a pretty slender example, right? I mean, they eat 12 cows. From the lips to the tail. I used to eat this oxtail soup, yeah. Yeah. We don't waste anything. And then you look at hogs, people eat 25 hogs and 2,000 some chickens. And most of these animals have never seen the day of light, or many of them not for very much. Hogs, these sows, are being kept in factory farms. They're kept in cages. And just the ethics and the morality alone should really stop us from eating these kind of animals. Just that alone. When you see how chickens are raised nowadays, with all the additives, with all the antibiotics, with everything goes into that, it's no longer very, very smart. It's not a responsible choice anymore for most intelligent people. But look at the cheese intake, this cheese consumption here. This is 1960, 1965, 1970. Something happened here. Look at this. Suddenly the slope of the curve changes dramatically. And now we're eating lots of cheese. What happened in 1970? Come on. Yeah. Who said that? Who said it? Yeah. What happened in 1970? The fast foods became fashionable. Cheese became part of the burger, right? Cheese are everywhere. We invented new dishes like macaroni and cheese is everywhere today. It's very, very cheap. We don't even know what to do with all the cheese. Where's this cheese coming from? Something happened in 1970. You know what happened? The people rose up against the dairy industry and said, you are giving us all this whole milk with all the saturated fat, which is the equivalent of so many strips of bacon. Remember we talked about this? You are causing heart disease with all the whole milk. We want to have skim milk. So they introduced 2% and then they introduced blow water. Right? What do you think they did with all the fat that they skimmed off so that you can be healthy? They put in cheese. And so we drink skim milk and we eat cheese sandwiches. Brilliant, isn't it? Cheese. If somebody asks me what is healthier, a small piece of wild fish or 3 slices of cheese, I would say have the wild fish. Because when it comes to cheese, it's mostly saturated fat, it's salt, it has no fiber, it's not in your best interest. We need to really think about cheese. Philadelphia cheese. 90% of the cheese is fat. Philadelphia cheese, 90% fat. I mean, you might as well eat Vaseline. That's about 100%. This is the second most important slide. It shows you that in North America, 50% of all the calories that we eat comes from processed, refined, engineered food made for profit. What's the percentage? 51% of all the calories we eat comes from engineered, processed, refined foods made for profit. Another 35% comes from animal products, and only 14% of the calories we eat comes out of the hand of a loving master designer. That is fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Maybe a few nuts, maybe some avocado. The diet in North America has radically changed. And with the change have also come the escalation, the increase in the Western diseases. Let me talk to you about one disease called coronary artery disease. When we talk about coronary artery disease, we really talk about heart disease. A heart attack occurs when you have some of these arteries here blocked, and the blood with the oxygen can no longer reach this portion of the heart muscle, and this heart muscle begins to die on you. And unless you call 911, you get to the hospital right away, and you get emergency services, the chances are that this could be a fatal heart attack depending on where the heart attack occurs. The further up it is, the more dangerous it's become. Here you see what a coronary artery looks like. This belongs to a 37-year-old truck driver. The artery should be wide open from here all the way to here. Should be wide open so blood can flow through these arteries and feed the organs with nutrients and especially oxygen. Oxygen is the name of the game. When you don't get enough oxygen to the heart muscle, it gives you pain. It's called angina pain. And if you have a heart attack, it cuts off the oxygen supply with the blood, and the muscle begins to die. It turns blue. Died by asphyxiation. How many of you were not here this morning when I showed the film of the beating heart? Okay, so some of you did not see that. I showed this morning a quick 2-minute film that showed how the arteries, the coronary arteries, are filling up with cholesterol, with fats, and with the calcium. They become very stiff, and the artery, instead of being 100% open, may only be 30% open. You can then sort of almost take out this inner sheathing that I showed you, which narrows the arteries. And this is at the basis of most of our chronic diseases. You see here, we are born with clean arteries. It's wide open, no obstruction. This is after 20 years on the American-Canadian diet. This is after 45 years. You already have 60% narrowing. And by the time you're 67 years of age, you probably only live on a 10 or 20% openness. And you oftentimes have no symptoms. The first symptom that this disease is hitting you, the first symptom all too often is sudden death. You remember Mr. Gandolfini, the soprano star, this actor? 58 years of age, no symptoms, had a big, huge meal. His boy, 13 years old, was with him in Rome, in Italy. Huge meal, and then 2-3 hours later, this young boy has to face his dad in the bathroom on the floor, expired, dead. Tim Russert, a beloved commentator on NBC for many, many years, considered to be one of the 100 most important people according to Time magazine, had his blood tests done, had his treadmill done 4 months before suddenly he collapsed. He never had heart disease before. They never had identified it. He was gone in 13 minutes. First sign, sudden death. I was in China, and I looked at people that had 20% narrowing, just like you see here. This is what we find in 18-year-olds in North America. When I was in China, looked at some of these autopsies. Here's what we found there. We found one of these arteries, 20% narrowed. This belonged to an 85-year-old farmer. 85 years of age. In China, we find the same narrowing in 18-year-olds in North America. This is not a matter of race. This is a matter of how people live. How you live largely determines how you die and when you die. And this is one of the most important slides here too, because when you have atherosclerosis, when you have a narrowing of the arteries that we showed you earlier, the arteries are becoming stiff now. The opening becomes smaller. When it affects the coronary arteries, you have to worry about heart disease, angina, heart attacks. What happens to the vessels to the brain, you have to worry about a brain attack. We call these strokes. When it happens to the memory banks and the arteries are narrowing down there, then you have to worry about increasing senility. We think it just happens because you get older. That's part of it. But the main cause probably is the atherosclerosis that comes with the kind of diet and lifestyle that we have here in Western society. Hearing loss, visual loss, these are directly related to the small arteries, to the eyes and to the ear being narrowed down, and they can no longer receive the proper nutrients and especially oxygen, and these vessels begin to cause a deterioration of the eye and the hearing. Hypertension, high blood pressure, gangrene, impotence. I don't know where this is coming from, but people think that impotence is a lack of Viagra. The problem really is it's a vascular problem. It's an arterial problem where the arteries, which are much, much smaller in diameter than the arteries to the heart, they become narrowed down. And when you want to have a constant blood flow at a very strategic moment, the blood flow is impeded and things begin to change. So impotence, I always tell men, they come to me usually and they say, what can I do to change it? I said, well, number one, stop smoking, because that causes a narrowing of the arteries. Number two, what you do in the kitchen can oftentimes determine what happens in the bedroom. And they always come to me and say, well, no, I'm going to change my diet. You just tell me. Now I don't know what good it will do. I'll do it. Yeah, that's right. So these are diseases that are not natural, and they are not necessarily a component of aging. Here's the largest study ever done since 1949. The government has spent over $100 million on this, and they are still following these people up. And they found that what drives these atherosclerotic disease processes is the amount of cholesterol. When it comes to total cholesterol, should always be below 4.0. And the blood pressure, high blood pressure, and smoking. These are the three big ones. And then it is diabetes, obesity, triglycerides, an inactive lifestyle, stress, and genetics. But the biggest ones are the ones way up here. And they're, just to give you some idea, if you happen to be 35 years of age, you're male, the chance of a heart attack in 6 years, with these kind of numbers here, these are high numbers, is 140 times more commonly found within 6 years. In people that have a high cholesterol, this would be about 7.7, that have high systolic blood pressure, they're smokers, they have diabetes, they didn't pass the treadmill test, when compared to people that have ideal numbers like low blood pressure and the cholesterol below a 4.0. And please note, all these factors here have one thing in common. They're related to our lips. Lips, 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 lips. Our lips get us into a lot of trouble. And actually, I could add something here. You know, this atherosclerotic process, this narrowing of the arteries, is not only affecting our coronary arteries, it's not only affecting the arteries of the male sex organ, or our feet, or our kidneys. It's also affecting the arteries that are bringing blood to the frontal lobe of the brain, where we know and understand resides religiosity, religious values, classical music. These kind of things are all stored and processed up in the frontal lobe, right behind here, behind the forehead. The frontal lobe is where this is all happening up there. This is where judgment resides. Responsible living, loving people, ministering to people. This is all up here. But when these arteries are being clogged, not only to the heart, but also to these frontal lobe areas, what happens? The soft, small voice of a loving God, of a spirit, can no longer reach us because the hardware is no longer in optimal condition. And so my point is that food may also have a lot to do with spirituality. Are you struggling with a dulled spiritual life? Maybe you ought to take a look at what's on your plate. Forks and knives. They can be instruments of mass destruction, or they can be instruments of healing. They can make it more difficult to pick up the still small voice from above. Call it the conscience, whatever you want, versus making it more easily to pick up these good vibes and directions. Now I want to take you to Loma Linda. That's where I live. Well, not in this building there, but I see this building from my home, and I want to take you down to a place where I have lived for the last 45 years. And of course, you know that Adventists are considered to be the blue zoners. These are people that live longer than most other populations in the world. But I want to caution you, you know, instead of taking a self-righteous attitude, well, we are living longer than most people, just think what it could be if we would really do what we learned more than 150 years ago. Are you with me? Are you with me? Adventists live longer because they don't smoke and they don't drink. Right there you have two big factors. And they have a good social network. It's a supportive network that becomes very important in strengthening the immune system. But the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute, raised the question, what is it in the Adventist lifestyle that causes people to live longer? It doesn't matter whether they live in Japan or in Holland or in Loma Linda. They all live longer, usually about 8 to 10 years. Why? And here's what they found. Number one, they don't smoke. Number two, and right there you gain 6, 7 years. Number two, they don't use alcohol, so there are fewer traffic accidents involving single cars. Does that make sense? You don't run into a tree as often as people that are drunk. Right? That's right there, some obvious things, obviously. But let me show you. This is now looking at Adventist meat eaters when compared to Californians who also eat meat, but they also smoke. They don't. Guess what? The Adventists have less coronary disease than the average Californians. But please note, among the Adventists that live a very similar lifestyle, all of these groups except they have a different diet. Some of them are eating meat, some of them are lacto-vegetarians, and some of them are pure vegetarians. Look, there's a difference of 300% in terms of deadly heart disease. So what do you think? If you want to live longer, if you want to have less heart disease, what should you do? Move towards green? Would that be a good idea? Folks, are you out there? I mean, you should be excited about these kind of things here. I mean, I see some, why don't we all stand up? Yeah, you have to wake up now. Please stand up. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now, turn in this direction. Look at this wall, all of you. Look at this wall back there. All of you, look at this wall. And please reach out to the person in front of you and give this person a back rub right now. And let them wake up. Please wake up. Please stand up. Give a back rub. Please. Come on. That's a weak back rub there. Come on. Now don't be shy. Okay, now turn around and return the favor. Come on. Now if you don't like the back rub, find a different partner. Okay, we'll do it again. All right, folks, let's settle down. Are you good for another 10 minutes? Okay, good. Okay, very good. All right. Are you there? Are you ready? Okay, good. Now, this was called the Adventist Health Study number 1. This is now the Adventist Health Study number 2. But before I go there, let me show you what we found in the Adventist Health Study number 1. The Adventists that were lacto or vegetarians. These people don't eat meat, but they eat cheese and eggs, okay? Dairy and eggs. So they compared these people with the Adventists that were meat eaters in California, and they found that the lacto-vegetarians only had half the amount of high blood pressure, 2/3 the amount of arthritis, 2/3 the amount of prostate cancer, and half the amount of colon cancer. What do you think would be a good idea? To move towards the green square there, right? Which is what? Lacto-vegetarian. This is a very, very good move. So then they started this huge study in 2002, and it's just now the results are coming in. The government spent $25 million, and here's what they found. They found that in Canada and the United States, about 10% of the people are pure vegetarians. We call them sometimes vegan. 30% are lacto-vegetarians, 10% are fish eaters, and 50% are meat eaters. So you can identify yourself where you are. You know what you are. Are you a fish eater? Are you a lacto-vegetarian? Are you a pure vegetarian? Are you a flexitarian? That means at home you don't eat meat, but when you go out with the boys and with the girls you eat meat. Are you a flexitarian? What are you? Okay. Now let's take a look. These are the results of a one of the largest studies ever done. We're looking at about 100,000 Adventists in North America. And they found that the Adventist women, on the average, weigh 40 pounds more than the vegetarian Adventist women. So if you're struggling with weight, what would be the answer? Well, I mean, you can go and be a sort of a flexitarian, and you probably lose some weight. You can also go and be a fish eater, you lose some weight. You can go and become a lacto-vegetarian, and you lose about 20 weight. But if you really want to lose weight, 40 pounds, what do? You go to the, what color? Green, yeah. How about men? You want to know what your situation is, or you rather not? Okay, the difference here is about 30 pounds. And so if you go from meat eater to lacto-vegetarian, it's much, much better. You will lose some weight, but when you go down to the pure vegetarian category, you lose probably about, on the average, you're probably 25, 35 pounds lighter. So what's the take-home lesson here? Go to the green color, right? Let me go a bit further. They looked at the Adventists and the different diets in terms of diabetes, and they found that the Adventist meat eaters, 6.3% of these people are actually on medication for diabetes, while down here, if you are a pure vegetarian, it's only 1.6%, which means the likelihood of developing diabetes is 6.3 versus 1.6, is about 4 times more likely to happen on a meat diet. So again, you can choose your disease. Choose your disease, you can just do it very easily by picking the kind of diet that predicts that. How about high blood pressure? Being on medication, 19% of the Adventists that were meat eaters were on blood pressure medication, while down here was only 5%. And then it comes to cholesterol, 15% of the Adventist meat eaters were on cholesterol medication, and here was only 3%, and I was surprised that it would be even 3%. Because when you're on a really good diet, you shouldn't have to ever worry about cholesterol numbers. To have genetically determined cholesterol is 1 out of 500. So I want to move now into the next phase, and I probably need about 15, 20 minutes to that. The question is, we can prevent these diseases by following a very simple diet. Did you get that feeling? Looking at the Adventist Health Study? But the question is, it's too late for me. I've already been a meat eater for so long. I'm 50 years of age. Is there anything that I can do to reverse this disease? Are you interested in knowing if you can reverse diabetes? Are you interested in knowing if you can do something about your high blood pressure? Are you interested in getting off some of these medications? Are you interested in getting some of the cholesterol levels down to the 4-point level? Are you interested in reversing heart disease? Okay, then listen. Okay, here's the first major lesson that came to us from World War II. The German Nazi armies invaded many of these European countries, and this is an example of what happened in Norway. As they went into the Norway country, the armies, they took all the livestock away from these people to feed the armies, the soldiers. So these people now were forced by circumstances to live on a very, very simple diet, which was homegrown foods from the gardens. And within a year's time, look at this, what happened here. Heart disease rates dropped dramatically, diabetes dropped, cancer rates began to drop, obesity came down. I mean, the Nazis had never intended to make Norway a healthy population. They just wanted to have the meat for their soldiers. But that's what happened. And people said, wow, it can happen that fast. And they said, well, maybe it's just a fluke. And they said, well, let's see. When the war is over and people begin to eat again like they used to eat before the war, then if the rates go up again, then there must be some kind of a very strong association, sort of like a cause and effect relationship. And look what happened after the war. the disease came back very rapidly, which is a very powerful documentation that you can turn off these diseases and you can turn them on by the kind of diet that you use. We can use monkeys, they used baboons and one of the university hospitals, and they give these monkeys a typical hospital diet. Guess what happened to the monkeys? After 19 months, they had massive heart attacks. So in the CHIP program, I always tell Kathy, I said, Kathy and Gordon, be sure that no one stays in a hospital more than 19 months. That's a dangerous place. Don't stay in the hospital that long. Look what happened to the monkeys. So then they did large studies with whole colonies of these animals, and depending on the diet, first they created the problem, they caused the narrowing of the arteries, and then before they had a heart attack, they would then sacrifice an animal, check out what was the narrowing, and then they had a reference point, and then they would take the other monkeys and get them very different diets, and the diet was giving them the very best results to reverse this buildup of plaque and to cause a melting down was a diet that was a vegetarian, vegan diet. Monkey chow. Fruits, they give them some vegetables, you know, something that monkeys eat. And we can now turn on and off these diseases, not just in monkeys, we can do it in cockerels. These are roosters. We can take care of many, many of these species. We can cause the disease, and all we have to do is feed them a lot of egg yolks, a lot of corn oil. Egg yolk is the #1 source of cholesterol in the American diet, the Canadian diet. People ask me always, they said, you don't recommend eggs? I said, oh, no, I recommend eggs. I recommend 1 egg every Easter, every leap year. And you know, of course, you know that the egg yolk is the one that contains the cholesterol, right? But even the egg white is not in our best interest. So it might be probably wise to let these eggs go totally. So we talked about reversing these diseases. Can you reverse cholesterol? What do? Take statin drugs? No. This is not the way to go. What you want to do is you want to move towards a very simple diet that consists of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, maybe a few nuts. I would tell my wife that you're a great audience. You learned this thing very, very rapidly. Number 1, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, and a few, don't forget the nuts, but just a few. Don't take a handful, just a few, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're good nutritious foods, but they're also high in calories, okay? So cholesterol in the CHIP program comes down 10, 15, 20 points. Very easily, very consistently. We have over 65,000 CHIP graduates, and we know what happens to them very consistently. The cholesterol levels, the higher they are, you can see here the green bars, the higher the cholesterol, this is very, very high. You know, this is something like an 8.0 here. This is a 4.0. So the higher the cholesterol in your blood, the bigger the drops, like 40% drop, just 3 weeks. So this is very, very good news. Well, people say to me, okay, so you can do it in monkeys, you can do it in many, many animal species. You've demonstrated some success in World War II. But what about, have there been some studies done on humans? Okay, yeah, here's Dr. Dean Ornish, who inspired President Clinton to change. Dr. Ornish was a Harvard-trained cardiologist, and he took 48 patients with heart disease. They were supposed to have bypass surgery. They didn't want to go under the knife, and they said, we rather want to go on your vegetarian, very, very low-fat diet. I mean, very low fat. Remember? The Canadian diet is about 35% fat. This is 7%. Really cutting back on all fats, margarines, butters, all of these kind of things. Very, very strict, because these people are very, very sick. In 1 year, 82% of the plaques, this buildup, these pimples on the inside of the artery, 82% of these pimples, these plaques, had begun to diminish, and the plaques began to melt down. 82%. And then they looked at the other group, This was a control group. There were 20 people also with heart disease, and they followed the American Heart Association, which would be sort of, what do you have here? The Stroke and Heart Foundation, right? What is it? Heart and Stroke Foundation, yeah. And so they still, they still allow 30% fat. You can have some cholesterol. They don't really strictly vegetarians. They said, just cut back a little bit. So they said, okay, let's see what happens to these people. 53% of these pimples on the inside of the artery, 53% of the plaque, 50% of these narrow vessels got more narrowed. They progressed in their downward spiraling towards the end of the road. Are you with me there? And so Dr. Ornish said, this is not a program that we can recommend. If you have disease, you need to go all the way. And the further you go, the better you're off. The faster it will begin to reverse itself. There you see Dr. Ornish on the Newsweek cover. The article said, Dr. Ornish has scientifically proven that people can open their blocked arteries without drugs or surgery. You don't have to split people's torsos and chest wide open. You can just guide them through a rigorous lifestyle. That's what Kathy and Gord are doing. That's what the team is doing in London. And that's why I'm here. We want to honor them for 20 programs that they have done. One of our most successful programs in North America. Thank you so much. You know, they don't take anything away from you. What they take away from you is heart disease and diabetes and hypertension and obesity and arthritis. That's what they're taking away from you if you do what they teach you to do, or what we try to teach you in the films, right? Have you seen some of the new films? How many of you have seen the new films? Don't you love Darren? Wow, I mean, we have great experts in those films. I'm so excited about this. Some of the best people in the world are on these films, like Dr. Tibbetts, the man that talks about forgiveness. Important, very important. On how to flourish, how to find happiness in life, how to do something about your hypertension, what to do about osteoarthritis, what about to do osteoporosis. Do we get enough calcium if we let go of milk? It's all addressed in a very, very professional manner. These people who bought and acquired my program some 2 years ago, they spent a total of $7 million in making this, hopefully, the world's best program that is now going viral. So you're very, very fortunate that you have been here in a town where you have some very devoted volunteers that have done everything to empower you. I mean, you could have gone to the Pritikin program in Miami. You could spend 4 weeks there. It's a beautiful program. It's a spa, 5-star, everything's perfect. They have good education there. They have good exercise there. They have physicians to monitor things there for 4 weeks. But you spend $25,000 to $45,000, and people come from all over the world to go there. And when these people go back home, there's no one there to help them. You come to the CHIP program, and Kathy and Gord, they're going to be here for a while, right? For a long while. They're going to help you to stay on the program. You're not just going through the boot camp, you know, this Kickstart program. What is it, 4 weeks? No. They're going to take care of you month after month after month. So we're very excited about what we have going on here in London. And lastly, I want you to meet Dr. Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic. He used the plant-based, very low-fat, whole foods diet, which means basically eat foods that come of the hand of the master. Foods without nutrition labels. And he took The Walking Dead. They were sent to him by the Cleveland Clinic. They said, we've done all the bypass, we've done all the stents, there's nothing more we can do. Why don't you take over and see what you can do with the dietary program? He did, and here's what they found. 18 patients, they were given 6 months to live. They had 49 cardiovascular events during the time that they were seeing the doctors during those 8 years. And then they came to the to Dr. Campbell's and Esselstyn's program, and you notice what happened to the cholesterol. Here it was 6.0, and here it's now 3.5. It dropped very rapidly within a few weeks. And over the next 5 years, there was not 49 heart attacks or strokes or angina attacks. But how many? Then he kept them there another 7 years. Now it's 12 years total. He still kept them there below, at that low level of 3.6, just by diet. And how many cardiovascular events did he have in 12 years? 0. Here in 8 years, they had 49. And as you get older after a heart attack, you're supposed to have many, many more of these events taking place. You can be with the best cardiologist. It doesn't help you to prevent these diseases. You can be with the best medications. The disease progresses unless you change the cause. And the cause is related to the diet that we eat. It has to do with how we use the fork and the knife. That's the lesson. That's the point I want to make. You are in charge. You shape your future. You're the captain of your ship. You put the oars in the water or you don't. It's up to you. That's the good news, that you can shape your future, but it's also the bad news because it means you have to do it. You can't expect that some miracle drug is going to do it for you, or you say, well, you know, I pigged out. I'll just take a little bit more insulin tonight and I'll be all right. Folks, it's not going to work that way. Don't fall into those traps. Oh, I just take a bit more medication and that will take care of it. No, 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 no. You've got to take care of the causes, which has to do with how we use our lips, how we use our fork and our knife. Here you see some of the results. Dr. Esselstein's program showed that within 2.5 years, the coronary arteries, which are very, very narrowed here, there's very little blood flowing through these vessels. This is what happens 2.5 years later. The same artery, wide open. You can open up these arteries and you can close them. Dr. Esselstein has written many, many articles, and he said, you know, these stents and bypasses, you know, they can be helpful, especially if you have a very life-threatening situation. But for the vast majority of patients, these procedures are not as effective as a very simple, low-fat, plant-based diet. He's written many, many scientific articles. And of course, Michael, we need to have the next picture. There are many people that have now joined the bandwagon. One of them is a very famous man. Let's take a look what happened to him 3 years ago.
How did you lose so much weight? What kind of diet are you on?
Well, the short answer is I went on essentially a plant-based diet. I live on beans, legumes, vegetables, fruit, no dairy, and it changed my whole metabolism, and I lost 24 pounds, and I got back to basically what I weighed in high school. But I did it for a different reason. I mean, I wanted to lose a little weight, but I didn't dream this would happen. I did it because after I had this stent put in, I realized that even though it happens quite often that after you have bypasses, you lose the veins because they're thinner and weaker than arteries. The truth is that it clogged up, which means that the cholesterol was still causing buildup in my vein that was part of my bypass. And thank God I could take the stents. I don't want it to happen again. So I did all this research, and I saw that 82% of the people since 1986 who have gone on a plant-based, no dairy, no meat of any kind, no chicken, turkey, if you can do it, 82% of the people who've done that have begun to heal themselves. Their arterial blockage cleans up. The calcium deposit around their heart breaks up. This movement has been led by a doctor named Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic, Dean Ornish, you know, in California, the doctors Campbell, father and son, who wrote the China study, and a handful of others. But we now have 25 years of evidence. And so I thought, well, since I need to lose a little weight for Chelsea's wedding, I'll become part of this experiment. I'll see if I can be one of those that can have a self-clearing mechanism. We'll see.
You know, Clinton has become the poster child for the vegetarian movement, which is really spreading quite a bit now. And we're all praying that he doesn't fall off the wagon. So far, he has done very well, 3 years. Now, that's heart disease. We can turn it off, we can turn it on. Let me just mention just very briefly what we can do with diabetes. This is a picture of diabetic patients. Most of them are type 2 diabetes. They took 80 patients on insulin And this doctor in 1955 prescribed a very low-fat, natural, whole food diet, which is, okay, that's what he did. And 50 of these 80 patients on insulin were off insulin in 6 weeks. I mean, this is unheard of. Of course, in the CHIP program too, we have to reduce very quickly the insulin of people that come into our program. We have to reduce them sometimes to the point where it's only half the amount, sometimes they're totally off medication. And we begin to help them to understand that any time that you are diabetic and you're taking any medication except one particular drug, that will always cause you to eat more food and you gain weight. And as you gain weight because of the medication, you need more medication now to counteract the higher blood sugar levels. So as you take more medications, now you're gaining more weight. So as you gain more weight, you need to have more medication. And so you don't cure anything, but you can cure it within weeks if you're willing to make some simple lifestyle changes and perhaps for once help your physician understand that he is in the old paradigm. We have now a new concept that is really working. Here is the new concept by Professor Anderson. He said 50% and more of these diabetics on insulin and 80% and more of those on pills could normalize their blood sugars and be off medication within weeks if they change their diet towards a high fiber diet. Let me ask you a question. Where do you think you find fiber? Does meat have fiber? Does cheese have fiber? Do processed foods have fiber? They can have some. But where do you find most of the fiber in? You're very knowledgeable. I mean, I'm very impressed. I mean, I'll tell my wife about it tonight. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The plant foods have the highest amount, it's almost exclusively the plant, they call them plant fibers. And number two, they have most of these 100,000 micronutrients that you cannot find in animal products. So I mean, we are winning on both counts. How about hypertension? 60% of the people on blood pressure pills could be off their pills if they just made a few little changes. Here you see the Critical program where I was a director there. 83% of these people are no longer on blood pressure medication within less than 4 weeks. And these people have been on medication for 2 years minimum for their blood pressure. They're gone for less than 4 weeks. And when we follow them up after 2 years, 80% are still off these blood pressure medications. And of course, you have always side effects with these drugs, as you know. You know, impotence is just sort of one of these factors that we are, you know, we're aware of. And so here's Dr. Coop. He was the Surgeon General of the United States, and he said, the biggest problem in medicine today is how do you motivate people? How do you educate and how do you motivate people? I mean, Adventists have known some of these concepts more or less for many, many years, but how do you really help Adventists to really do it? What can we do to really become the lighthouse on the hill? What can we do?
Set an example.
To set an example. How can we help people to set an example? That's why this whole weekend is not just a scientific weekend, but it's really a spirit-filled weekend. I want you to understand that there's a loving Creator God. I want you to understand that He has given everything He could give, even to give us better health. And too bad that many of us just... There's a special writer that I appreciate very, very much, that has influenced my life more than anybody else. And this lady wrote, those who overcome on appetite will be able to overcome all other temptations. The biggest temptation to overcome is the seduction that is being pushed into our direction by the food industry with marketing and everything else, and by our so-called friends. Folks, if you have friends that are seducing you into this kind of a lifestyle, maybe you should take a look and maybe see if you can help these friends or maybe develop some new friends. When we were in Rockford, we had 6,000 people there in our CHIP program, 6,000. We had 27 restaurants there that began to offer CHIP food. And we also noticed that within a year's time, all the people that came into our program as smokers that had stopped smoking, after 1 year, they had new friends. They were all non-smokers. We also found out that the people that came into our program that were large, I mean, they carried a lot of weight, they were obese. After years, they had been losing weight. They had developed new friendships with leaner people. Because the way that you want to help yourself is by associating people that are doing the right things for the right reasons. Are you with me there? So how do you implement these kind of concepts? We talked about eating more fruits, more vegetables, for whole grains, more legumes, right? Maybe a few nuts, get into an exercise program. We haven't said much about exercise, but it's a given. And to become nicer people. A great German poet wrote, "Virtues grow in gardens, not abattoirs." They don't grow in slaughterhouses. Niceties, virtues, gentleness, tactfulness, honesty, purity of heart, they grow in gardens. We have never really fully understood how perhaps a diet can have a powerful effect on our values in general. Until we begin to realize that it affects the frontal lobe where you can find these beautiful values being centered. So how do you implement these concepts? How do you make the changes? I've tried it. I tried it years ago when I took a patient and I spent an hour with that patient, week after week after 6 weeks, and I was a total failure. And I began to understand why doctors don't believe that they can change people's behaviors. They cannot change behaviors. In most cases, it's impossible unless you bring people into a group and the group is helping the group. You have support. You have accountability. You feel depressed, but you know that your friend is going to be waiting for you there. And guess what? You sort of drag out of a bed and you get there because you don't want to disappoint them. These are the kind of things that are the magical things. Group community education is the answer to the community epidemic that we have. We need to transform the society. We need to transform the culture. We need to have 1 or 2 good restaurants here where you can take the chip people because they want to eat out sometime, right? In Rockford, we had 27 of these restaurants. They all came to us. They said, "Aren't we good enough to serve your food?" I said, "No, we'd be glad to help you." They want to have access to 6,000 people. They said, "We don't care what we cook, as long as we make a money on it." I mean, it's a business. Tell us what the recipes are, and we put a big decal into the window, chip approved, and they all flock to these restaurants. So this is what it was. We had these on billboards. And then here you see the community-based intervention program, intensive education in groups. It's not just that you teach people what perhaps should be a good thing to do, but we also help them to acquire skills. We don't just say, have a good breakfast in the morning. The people go to McDonald's and have a McMuffin and an eggs. No, we show them, how do you really do this? What's a good breakfast? How can I do this? If I don't use milk, because I heard that it might not be the best interest, what do I really take in its place? And that's what CHIP does. CHIP takes you by the hand and takes you right through it. So what are the recommendations then? I explained that to you, didn't I? Where the calories come from, less fat, less sugar, more whole starch, and less protein. We have to move in this direction here. This is the ideal way to go. This is the diet that gives you protection from these diseases. Folks, listen. There is a major opponent to these concepts. He has always been around. He started in the garden with one food. I mean, people say it was an apple. I think it was a mango, really, but that's another issue, right? So, but he tempted people with one fruit. Do you really think God said that? Do you really believe this? Today, he's not tempting us with one food. Today, he's tempting us with 20, 30, 40,000 foods in these supermarkets. And folks, you don't need all these foods. You don't have to go through all these aisles. Just go to the outside where you have fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and a few nuts, and you're done in 20 minutes. I do the shopping for my wife. No problem. I said, oh, honey, I'll take care of it. 15, 20 minutes, I'm done. She doesn't make a long list. I just know what we need. It's easy to do. You don't have to read labels all the time. If it's processed, leave it alone as much as you can. We need to cut the consumption of these refined calories. We have to cut the calories from animal products, and we have to elevate this from 14% to probably 70 to 75%. More fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and some nuts. This is the way to go. And lots of water. The more color, the more nutritional value. The more raw food in general, the better you're off. And so what we then recommend is really cut back. This is the US diet. This is also a Canadian diet. We have about 100 grams of fat. We should probably get down to 40 grams. We have about 400 milligrams of cholesterol. We probably should get really down to less than 50 milligrams or zero. We consume 35 teaspoons of sugar. We probably should get down to less than 10 teaspoons. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to be some kind of a crazy. You don't have to become an extremist. But folks, we have to recognize if you're on the North American diet, you're such an extreme on this side that making a little change is not enough. You have to go as far as you can go. Salt. We take 10 times more salt than the body needs. 10 times more. And then we have massive hypertension, high blood pressure problems. And people say, well, okay, did you hear that, honey? No more salt shaker in the house now. We're throwing it out. You're totally wrong. Because 84% of all the salt that you eat doesn't come in the salt shaker. It comes in processed foods and restaurant eating. So come to the CHIP program. We teach you how to choose the best foods. And then fiber. The Canadian diet is 10 grams. We need to have at least 35, 40, 50 grams. And when you do this, a wonderful thing happens to you. It puts a smile back on your face. No more anxiety. No more Reader's Digest reading for 2 hours. You just go in and you go out, you're done. Every day. Easy. No laxatives, nothing. You just have your flaxseed in the morning, and it just works like magic. And then lots of water, 8 to 10 glasses a day. So when people come to us and they ask us, what should we do? We tell them, if you are on a typical American diet, Canadian diet of meats, dairy, eggs, processed foods, alcohol, and caffeine, maybe this is the worst outcome, you see, the worst health. Move less and less and less, and in the process, you eat more and more and more, and you move towards the more ideal, optimal diet, which means more fruits, more vegetables, more legumes, more whole grains, and more water. And your body responds, because remember, you are rebuilding your body very regularly. You're rebuilding your red blood cells. You're rebuilding the lining of your stomach. You're rebuilding your bones. You become a new person regularly. But you have to put the best food in. Here's some of the results from our CHIP program. You can see the cholesterol levels drop about 20%. The high triglycerides drop 40% in these programs. We had 525 diabetics coming into the program, and after 4 weeks, there were only 301 diabetics. And I asked a person at the Rotary Club the other day, I said to these Rotarians, what happened to these 224 people that are missing here? What happened to them? And they said, oh, they probably died. No, they didn't die. That was just a joke. They're no longer diabetics. They're no longer diabetics. They've made some simple changes, high fiber diet, they're no longer diabetics. And the same thing is true here for people with high blood pressure. There were 210 people with high blood pressure. After 4 weeks, there were only 69 people that still had high blood pressure. The others had normalized. You are in charge. Let me see if there's a, yeah. Let me finish with this one here.
In my life, I've lost 1,000 pounds. I like to tell people I always find them again, too. I've struggled throughout my life with my weight. I've always been heavy. It's important to me that, I stick around to see my grandchildren, live a healthy life and life expectancy. And I've lived a very long time, very luckily. I'm one of the typical examples of what you call living by luck, not by choice.
Through the CHIP program, I have learned how to be a smarter shopper. I spend time at the grocery store reading labels and comparing products as to which things are my healthiest choices.
I learned how well nutrition can reverse many of the diseases that we have in our country.
One of my blood pressure medicines reduced by 50%. I expect when I go back to the doctor, there will be even a further reduction.
I've lost 47 pounds since I started. I lost a lesser amount of weight during the first 40 days, but I've continued on since the CHIP program. But during the program itself, my biggest drop was in my cholesterol level. My cholesterol level was 205 before, it was 154 after. My triglycerides went down, my blood pressure stayed the same, all my other factors went down.
I think it's honestly helped our relationship. I'm not as moody anymore. Yeah.
And it's more exciting when we're walking around the track, we're talking and we're asking about our day, whereas we would have been sitting on the couch and eating and watching Netflix or watching a movie together. So it's definitely, I think, brought our relationship stronger and in a more healthy way in numerous, I think, avenues.
I wish I had started it 20 or 30 years ago. I'm no young bird now,
The biggest thing with CHIP is that it's a lifestyle that you can sustain because it's something you don't have to measure, you just do.
We're not waiting till we're 60 and getting a stent in our heart and having, being diagnosed with some kind of high blood pressure or high cholesterol. We're trying to do this as a preventative thing, so we're choosing to be healthy, not waiting for a prescription.
It's something you can continue to do. It's a lifestyle, it's not a diet. It's a way of living to be healthy, happy, and productive.
I think some new people have come in since we started this afternoon, and do we need a break just for 5 minutes to use the washroom? Or, yeah, I hear a yeah back there. 5 minutes is it. We will start in 5 minutes, and I think Dr. Diehl's going to do the Nathan Pritikin story. Everybody's awake? They can stay awake to listen to this? I think it's about an hour. Yeah, we'll have as soon as you come back, 5 minutes, we'll have the music that Lenita and Augustino are going to do, and then we'll start.